coronavirus. What we're going to do, this is the topics, we're going to re-review the testing. I'm still getting a lot of questions about testing, and so I thought I would just kind of do a recap. We'll talk about the real cause of disease, and what you can do about it, and why are young people having strokes? So you're concerned, and what's my gut have to do with all of this? And then we'll turn it over to questions and answers, okay? So let's get to the antibody testing. So again, there's two types of tests, right? There is the PCR, or the RT reverse transcriptase PCR testing, and the antibody testing. So the PCR testing is that nasal swab, and it's looking for the virus. That's what it's doing. And it's determining if the person is infected or not. The antibody test, on the other hand, which is what everybody's waiting for right now, is the blood draw. It is not looking for the virus. It's looking for antibodies. Those are the immune chemicals that are being made to fight the infection, okay? Now there's different types, but the ones that are of most interest here is the IgMs and the IgGs. Right? The IgMs, if you recall, is the acute or the early stage, right? And the IgG is the chronic or long-term antibody. All right, so this is the one that most scientists are interested in, is the IgGs, because that's the one that determines long-term immunity. Okay. So we'll go back to this graph. When you look at the graph, right, the blue line is your trajectory of the infection. Remember, we have the early onset of symptoms, or actually we're asymptomatic but infected. Then you become symptomatic. When we become symptomatic around day 7 is when the IgMs, that early antibody, takes off. And it rises and it falls with the trajectory of the infection itself. And then it's later on that the IgG antibodies, right, the long-term ones, take off, and they continue to rise, and they kind of drop slowly over an extended period of time. So again, because it's a new virus, nobody really knows what's going to go on with the IgG and how long the immunity lasts. But if it does follow the same trajectory as the SARS-CoV-1 back in 2002 and 2003, it should last, quite a while, because that one is lasting about 15 to 17 years. So if you need more information on the antibodies and this information, you just go back and re-review the webinar that we did specifically on antibody testing, okay? Okay, so this is what scientists are actually kind of, how they look at the infection. They're breaking it down into 3 phases, 1, 2, and 3. So phase 1 is the infection itself. So again, people in phase 1 can be asymptomatic. They don't know they're infected, or mild infections, or mild symptoms, I should say. And in phase 2, right, now we have overt symptoms, right? The classic fatigue, fever, body aches, flu-like symptoms. In phase 2, right, you have about 80% of people infected with symptoms are going to resolve, right? And they're not going to get to the hospital. 80%. The 20% is the problem. The 20% of the people that it is not resolving, and these people have to go to the hospital, all right, get into ICU and be put on a ventilator, okay? And the outcome is not really so good, right? So if you want to take a look at this 20 percentile. So these are the statistics, all right? If you look at a person who is older than 65 and who had to be put on a ventilator, 97.2% of the time, they don't make it. Staggering. If you're 18 to 65 and you're put on a ventilator, 76.5% don't make it. So the ventilator obviously is not the answer. That's not going to save you. Look at it compared to not getting onto a ventilator. So if you're over 65, and even if you're admitted to the hospital, but you're not put on a ventilator, right, almost 74% of the people survive, right? 18 to 65, less than 20% die. 80% of people between 18 and 65, not put on a ventilator, make it. Now, this is not saying that the ventilator is at fault. I'm making that clear. It's just showing you that if you get to the stage where they're trying a ventilator, it's too late. So what we want to try to figure out and determine moving forward is what separates these people not on a ventilator from the people who get on a ventilator. Pretty important. So the COVID-19, right? We see young adults having strokes, and we heard about hypoxia. There's a little webinar on hypoxia. If you're interested, go back and review that. Again, hypoxia, no oxygen, or lack of oxygen. They can't breathe, right? And what about children? We're hearing about children with multi-system failure, right? So what they're saying is that it's not a lung disease. It's not a lung disease. It's a blood vessel disease. What you're seeing here is a picture of a blood vessel. And the wall of that blood vessel are called endothelial cells. They line the wall. When these cells are becoming damaged, right, they're splitting open, basically they're rupturing, and the red blood cells that you see here that carries oxygen are leaking out. Can't get the oxygen to the tissue. That's why the ventilator isn't going to do anything. The ventilator is taking over the function of the lung, as though the lung has failed. But the lung hasn't failed. The blood vessels carrying the oxygen has failed. Yeah, with you might go through these slides. So I know I kind of drew this out, but this is really probably the most, to me at least, the most interesting slide that I'm putting up here for you. If we go back to this blood vessel, I'm saying that the virus is damaging the blood vessel, right? But what's actually happening, right, is that there is constriction and pressure building up inside here related to high blood pressure. High blood pressure is damaging the blood vessel. So what happens here, this is the, you know, many of you may have heard, well, maybe you haven't heard, right? But there's a system in the body, it's just called the Angiotensin system, for short. It's what regulates blood pressure, the constriction and the dilation of blood vessels. And so a certain amount of constriction of blood vessels is important because you need to push blood through the body. You need to get the blood carrying oxygen to the brain, but you don't want to have sustained contraction, right? Same goes with high blood pressure itself. High blood pressure, the pressure volume is going up, it's banging on your artery walls, and it's damaging and causing inflammation to the artery walls. So what's happening here is, you remember some from earlier webinars that I did, I'm sure in your own reading, listening to things, you keep hearing about this ACE2 receptor. This is how the virus gets into your cells. Remember, it has to get past the barrier system first, then it gets into the system, but it attaches to a receptor on the cell called the ACE2 receptor. That's how it's able to get inside your cell. Well, this particular protein, Angiotensin 2, that is made in this system is what causes the constriction of blood vessels. But it's the responsibility of this enzyme, ACE2, to downregulate angiotensin 2. So it controls the constriction of the blood vessel. So what's happening is the virus is attaching to the ACE2 receptor and it's knocking it out of commission. So we don't have the ability, we're losing the ability for the ACE2 to downregulate angiotensin. So we have ongoing vasoconstriction. Blood pressure is going up. Hope you can follow that. Okay. Then we have external forces called oxidative stress. So people who have high blood pressure have excess oxidative stress. Okay. Lifestyle interventions and dietary habits, they increase oxidative stress. So external forces creating oxidative stress, and now we have this ACE2 inhibition allowing more vasoconstriction, which is leading to more oxidative stress. And this increase is causing these endothelial cells, these blood cells, to become damaged and to leak. And what's spilling out in a lot of people are clotting factors. And that's your thrombosis, tripping a stroke. So it's being triggered by damage to these cells, by the increase in oxidative stress, That's due to vasoconstriction, okay, because of this ACE2 being knocked out. Now, the other interesting thing that has come along is that what they're finding is that when these blood cells become damaged, right, is that there's parts of the blood vessel that are being exposed to the immune system that shouldn't be. And the immune system now, the immune system is creating a reaction to the blood vessels. They are finding what are known as antibodies called myocardiolipin antibodies, fancy word, but what it means is the immune system is now targeting the blood vessels. That is, my friends, autoimmunity. So now we have an autoimmune attack against the cardiovascular system. Now, I have been saying this in suspect for over a month, and I felt that there was an underlying autoimmunity to this thing, and that's why we were seeing these cytokine storms. Okay, now we have confirmation to this thing. Meaning is that the approach long-term is, right, it's gonna be immune management. Right? Whether we're managing any type of autoimmune condition or any type of chronic inflammatory condition, right, it's gonna be an immune management game. That's what it is. So here's just a picture. It's kind of not a clear picture, but it's just showing, you can see clearly the difference between this person and this person, although this person doesn't really have good posture, I could say that, right? But it's just showing you oxidative stress markers, right, from lifestyle and diet and whatnot, leading to oxidative stress. It's showing you here leads to diabetes, leads to cancer, leads to obesity, but leads to cardiovascular disease. Okay, and in this case, it's also contributing to the autoimmune response to that. Let me go find the other picture. Yeah. Another factor that's so important. Yeah, so COVID-19, hypertension, high blood pressure, and the gut microbiome. How often do you hear me talk about the gut, right? Now, I'm not going to go through the whole article and read the whole thing to you, but the first part of this is kind of important, right? Hypertension is one of the most concerning risk factors for severe illness due to COVID-19. According to one set of data, 30% of patients hospitalized with COVID-19 have high blood pressure. They already have high blood pressure, 30%. Being hospitalized, that was that 20% I showed you. Okay. While 12% have diabetes. Overall, the presence of hypertension has a comorbidity associated with a 2.5-fold higher risk of dying due to COVID-19. That's staggering percentages. Globally, more than 1 out of 4 adults have hypertension, and the number increases, that's globally, and the number increases to 1 out of every 3 adults in the United States. I'll let you sit on that for a little bit. 1 out of 3 people in the United States has high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is the highest risk for mortality regarding this virus. So is it about finding some kind of a medication or a vaccine that's going to save us? Right? Or is it really about lifestyle intervention? That's what I tend to think, right? Therefore, it is not surprising that 30% of patients hospitalized with COVID-19 have hypertension, but there does appear to be a correlation between the presence of hypertension and worse disease outcomes. One underlying thought of the cause of hypertension is intestinal dysbiosis. Now, if you haven't heard that word, dysbiosis refers to an imbalance in the ecosystem of our gut, right? An overgrowth of bad bacteria or yeast and not enough good bacteria. Okay? This is why there's so much information about the gut. So now you're having a direct connection between gut problems and hypertension and gut issues and the morbidity of COVID-19. Can we do something about our guts? Can we make changes and improvements in our guts? Yes. Okay, we can. With the right interventions and lifestyle and dietary changes, and maybe run the right test uniquely for you to find out what your specific needs are. Even genetically, we have different needs. So that, to me, that was pretty powerful. So I'm not going to read the rest of that to you. Okay. Now, here's what's kind of pretty cool too, right? Is that we know that there's a gas that is made in our cardiovascular system, and it's known as nitric oxide. So there's There's actually 3 types of nitric oxide. There's 3 subsets of nitric oxide. One is called inducible nitric oxide, and that is the bad stuff. Inducible nitric oxide is what damages the cardiovascular walls. And inducible nitric oxide is increased through poor lifestyle choices. But we have good nitric oxide, and one of it is known as endothelial nitric oxide. And what endothelial nitric oxide does is it dilates the blood vessels. So here you have the smooth muscle, okay? And when you have nitric oxide present, that blood vessel opens up. So nitric oxide, right, is the body's way of relaxing your cardiovascular system, relaxing the blood vessels, keeping your blood vessels more elastic so blood can go through, not so stiff, dilates them. So it tells you here that it creates better cardiovascular homeostasis. It improves overall immune system response. It helps blood vessels to grow. It helps your cells to proliferate, which is good, right? And it clears out dead cells. So this is pretty cool. And it helps to improve nerve transmission. So if you want a shortcut, so in our office, we have these products. Okay, we have a product called OptiNitric, right? And what OptiNitric is are amino acids, specific arginine and citrulline and ornithine. And those amino acids specifically are nitric oxide boosters. So this product will help to relax your blood vessels. I actually take this particular product when I go to exercise, before I exercise, so I can get more vascularization, more oxygen to my tissues while I'm exercising. This product by the same company called OptiBFF. This is all whole foods of polyphenols, of plants and fruits, like beets, for example, that are known producers of the good nitric oxide. So these are chewable capsules, and these are capsules that you swallow. This here called Biocardio Syrup, the ingredients in the Biocardio Syrup have been clinically proven to lower blood pressure, and in some cases up to 20 points. Now, I don't have high blood pressure, but I take this product every day. Take it every day, just to support my cardiovascular system. So I get up in the morning, I make a big bottle of water, and I put some lemon juice in here. I put a few drops of stevia in that. And I take the Biocardio Syrup, and I put a scoop of that in there. I also take the magnesium powder that I use in the office, and I put that into that also, because magnesium is also relaxes the blood vessels, helps to lower blood pressure. I've seen people lower their blood pressure just getting on the right dosaging of magnesium. Just remember, like your minerals, magnesium and calcium. Calcium is constricting. So many people are taking calcium supplements, right? And calcium is going to tighten the blood vessels, make them stiffer. Now, I'm not saying we don't need calcium, but we don't want it in excess, right? And we don't want to cause them that damage. And more people are much more deficient in magnesium than calcium. So certainly magnesium would be quite supportive, right? And also when you look at the electrolytes, sodium and potassium, potassium is relaxing, sodium is constricting. That's why you want to watch your intake of sodium. Okay. I'm not talking about pink salt or sea salt. I'm talking about, you know, the white junky salt, the preservative salt that they put into foods, right? Become a label reader. Read the nutritional profile, and you're going to be shocked when you look at packaged foods, okay, the amount of sodium that is in that. So from a management standpoint, again, lifestyle factors, right? You don't need me to beat you over the head with this, right? But anti-inflammatory diet. Right? We heard about paleo and keto, all these things, and they're all good diets. But there's no one diet that's right for every single person, right? But collectively, the studies have shown the Mediterranean diet globally is probably the best diet, if you can say, for everyone. And what is it? It's higher in your vegetables, right? Your plant-based foods, and fruits, and fish, and omega fish oils, and whatnot, right? Not a lot of processed preserved foods.
Not olive oil.
Huh?
Not olive oil.
A lot of olive oil, that's right. A lot of olives and olive oil. Exercise, extremely important. It also boosts your nitric oxide levels. But it's also important to understand at this time is that the exercise they put here is moderate. You don't want intense exercise, right? Because see, when you're doing intense exercise, right, not only do you surge cortisol, but you surge endorphins, that so-called runner's high, right? But what endorphins do is they stimulate your immune system. So you don't want to have, right, intense exercises, increasing endorphins, stimulating your immune system, when you're trying to fight the infection, because you want to avoid a so-called cytokine storm. The goal is to keep the immune system calm. That's the goal. Okay? That's why even some medications or what they're looking at are trying to kind of slow down or calm down that cytokine storm, right? Stress management, pretty self-explanatory. Sunshine, right? Not just because of the vitamin D, it's good for your brain. And your brain is an immune organ. Your brain needs sunlight. And laughter. I should have probably put down here too, a pet. We all should have pets, right? It's been shown through studies that people who have pets live longer, right? That's really good stuff. So one of the key things, right, is in balancing and supporting the immune system. I say balance, I'm talking about is you want it to kind of turn on when it should, and you want it to kind of calm down when it should. That's an appropriate response. So what you're seeing in these exaggerated cases, that the immune system gets turned on by the virus, but the problem isn't the virus, the problem is the immune system isn't calming down. So the damage to the cardiovascular wall, the damage to lung alveoli is happening because the immune system is creating the damage, right? And there's your autoimmunity again. So some key functional lab testing, if you haven't had any testing done in a while, it might be a good time to start thinking about it. Functional lab testing, looking at your gut health, obviously very important, hormone health. And I put over here progesterone and testosterone. Progesterone levels and testosterone levels in men are very important for healthy immune response. And progesterone and estrogen for women, very important, especially for both andropause and menopause, really important. But really the big player here is progesterone. For both men and women, healthy progesterone levels are really critical for supporting your immune system, for both turning it on, but more importantly, for buffering it. That's the key thing, buffering. Right? So you want to support these systems with the right supplements. And certainly you can ask about any kind of lab bundles that we have together, like if you want to run a gut analysis with hormones. The COVID antibody testing is available. So yours truly, I am having my COVID antibody test done on Monday, this coming Monday. And along with this test, I am running what's called a NutriVal test. It's a comprehensive test that includes a blood draw, urinary testing, right? And it's also a cheek swab for some genetics.
And that's the add-on genomics.
Yeah, but anyway, the real markers here is oxidative stress. This is going to show me about any kind of nutritional deficiencies, so I can be much more specific about what supplements and nutrients that I want. So it's a really powerhouse of a test. I'm combining this with the antibody test. I'm doing this on Monday. And of course, cardiometabolic profile. So anyway, so that's pretty much it. I think I kept it to almost 26 minutes, didn't I?
Good job.
Yeah, proud of myself. Cynthia's proud of me. Yeah, sorry. So we'll open it up to questions and answers. So what do we do?
So let me just stop this. So here's your from Ron. Have you heard of pronation of COVID-19?
Yeah. That's just a technique. That's just a technique.
So read the question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The question Ron asked here is, have you heard of pronation of COVID-19 patients instead of using ventilators? Yeah, I have, but they're doing that as just, they don't know what to do. They're just turning the body over, so they're trying to displace fluid. It's a last-ditch effort when the ventilators aren't working. We don't want to get to that place. We don't want to be the 20% of people getting to the hospital, right? We don't want that, right? And if you get to the hospital, right, if you didn't have high blood pressure, if your immune system was functioning better, as you saw from the previous slide, outcomes much more successful.
So wasn't part of the surprise in all of this that lung disease, asthma, breathing difficulties, which you would think?
Yeah, so Cynthia was mentioning that one of the interesting things, well, it was obvious to everyone, at least obvious, that if a person had compromised lung function, if they had COPD, or if they were having asthma, that they would be at a much higher risk than the rest of the population. And the truth is, certainly there's a risk factor there if you didn't have it. But the interesting thing is that the risk factor of having asthma isn't as high as the risk factor for hypertension. Hypertension is, I don't know what the percentage was I read, but it was like a 50-fold increase with hypertension versus asthma. Now, I wouldn't want to have asthma and hypertension. I wouldn't want to combine problems, right? I wouldn't want to have diabetes and high blood pressure, right? But the point is, all these things are actionable, right? And that's the really thing I keep campaigning on. You know, we'll get past this phase, right? But where are we as a society, as a nation, as a world, right? I think, you know, certainly the frontliners, bless them, and we need them, right, for the acute intervention to try to save lives. But it stands to reason that the model that we're in, the healthcare system model that we have of just medicating everybody is not working. It's not working, and it's time we have a new paradigm shift, right? We take control back.
Let me just.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions coming in? I know a lot of people are on phones, so they can't type in the questions.
So
somebody asked me to show this slide again. So again, and this kind of pertains to what the question Ron just asked about, you know, positioning or pronation, is they're doing the pronation on this group of people. This group here, right? Because this is not working, right? So these numbers are really staggering. This is a significant difference between the population of people that are winding up on vents versus the people that are not winding up on vents. Okay. All right. How do I get out of this thing? I'll just go back to this. Back here. Yeah. Let's see. Elaine just called in. She's asking, does genetic testing test for a SNP on your ACE receptors? Not that I'm aware of. I can actually look into that for you, but I do not believe so. I do not believe so. The genetic testing so far that I'm aware of is the antibody is against the actual cardiovascular system, the endothelial cells, and the actual heart muscle itself. Okay? But the truth is, and to answer your question, is that every tissue in the body really is up for an autoimmune expression. But as far as the genetic testing goes here, so I mean, to answer this question also is, there is some thinking about using ACE inhibitors, which is a blood pressure medication. Many people are on ACE inhibitors, right? But they just don't know enough yet. So what they're recommending is that if a person does have high blood pressure and they are on ACE inhibitors, don't stop. Highly recommended, don't stop. But as far as right now deciding to use ACE inhibitors as a treatment protocol, they're just not sure yet, because there's also a lot of side effects with that. But they are testing it in certain higher risk of the population that is infected. So they're looking into that. See, when you look at, just to answer further, when you look at genetic testing, genetic tests, when you talk about SNPs on genetic tests like this, you know, you're looking at, just because a person has a SNP doesn't mean that protein or that enzyme isn't working. It all has to do with the degree of the SNP and its relationship, and the cofactors are lifestyle. In other words, we can override a lot of SNPs. Okay? I think I mentioned that I have some pretty strong SNPs. I have a very strong methylation deficiency. Okay? So I take the methylated vitamins to override that SNP. I have a SNP that doesn't allow me to make the sugars that good bacteria feed on in my colon. And my stool test represented that, so I changed my protocol and I started doing some replacement therapies to override that SNP. One of the parts of the genetic testing that we look at is inflammatory markers. So some people, have a genetic predisposition to have a more heightened inflammatory response, and others don't. Right? So in my case, I have like a fair amount of genetic SNP that does push my inflammation. And when you combine that with methylation SNPs, right, which is my off switch is broken, I can't turn off inflammation so well. So if I get inflamed, then I take longer. That's why when I was a young kid, I had terrible seasonal allergies. I used to walk around with an inhaler. I'd have to be rushed to the emergency room periodically because I was having an exaggerated immune response that wasn't being calmed down. And I don't get that any longer because of all of the lifestyle choices that I did. So these things are all correctable.
Someone had asked that she read that COVID may be already mutating into a more virulent strain. Any indication of that?
No. So someone is asking, someone is stating that they're hearing that the COVID virus is mutating into a more virulent strain.
And the answer is no.
They're not in the research. I just was on a phone call last night. That doesn't seem to be the case. Viruses mutate. That's one of the things. One of the things that separates this particular virus is it's an RNA virus versus DNA viruses. So DNA viruses don't really mutate as much. RNA viruses tend to have more variations and they can mutate. But again, this is kind of following the pathway, or we hope that it follows the same pathway as the SARS-CoV-1 back in 2003. So even if there's a mutation, the mutation would have to be so significant, okay, that that the immune system wouldn't even recognize it any longer. So I haven't heard that to be the case.
So isn't it the case though that so by fall it won't have mutated that much? They'll be able to contact, trace, and isolate. But 10 years from now, like each one has gotten progressively bigger.
I don't know if you can hear that. Cynthia's saying that they don't expect the mutation to be that great by the fall. So what you see in the fall is not going to be a strong variation from when it's present, but it really is what happens from years going by. We're always going to be exposed to viruses. That's the point. We're always going to be exposed to viruses. We're always going to be exposed to bacteria and all kinds of different things. And viruses mutate, and we live with viruses. Now you take, for example, herpes viruses, Epstein-Barr viruses, varicella virus, chickenpox viruses. They live in us. They actually live in cells that the immune system can't get to. So they live there, okay? But they're quiet. You see, when the immune system is getting distracted because it's got to deal with other stuff, right? It's got to deal with fighting other infections, for example, or it's got to deal with food sensitivities, or it's got to deal with environmental chemicals. Right? I will tell you that the vast, I would say 80% of the patients that I see in the office, when we run just a straightforward conventional blood test, what's called a CBC, complete blood count, 80% of the population that I see, their white blood cell count is low. It's low. They have tired immune systems. I have to figure out why, and we have to work on changing that. But 80% of the people, maybe even more, their white blood cell count is low.
And then one of the eosinophils or monocytes is high.
Well, we've had markers like eosinophils and neutrophils. That can just kind of make a differentiation between whether it's a virus, bacteria, or parasite. But the point is, the white blood cell count is low, so that your immune system is tired. So if you have a tired immune system, how is it supposed to respond and protect you about another virus? It doesn't. And if you have hidden viruses like the Epstein-Barr virus or herpes virus, and it's tired, then these viruses can come out from these cells and they start creating new symptomatology. So we can have like multiple viral strains going on at the same time. So this still kind of comes back around to immune care, immune health, all right? That's immune health. What else we got here? Joe is asking a question. Will you be sending out an updated immune protocol with the new supplement suggestions? Can you wrap up with the top 3 preventative action items for preventative care? Repeat that again, Joe. Will you be sending out an updated immune protocol?
Sure.
Yeah, but the immune protocol is kind of the immune protocol. It's just depending upon, immune protocols should really be individualized.
But yes,
Right.
there is an updated list.
But there's updated lists. Yeah, it all depends to, how some people, as you know, Joe, some people take 3 or 4 products and that's enough for them. They get overwhelmed. Other people can take 18 different products. So it all has to be individualized. But yes, there's going to be sort of an update. Can you wrap up with the top 3 preventative items for preventive care? Again, to me, it has to do with where the person is. Are we talking just preventative in the sense that you're not infected? I would say glutathione is pretty darn critical. I would talk about enterovite or short-chain fatty acids. It's pretty important. Those are the fuel source for your colon.
So oxidative stress.
Yeah,
What you're talking about.
I'm talking about gut health.
And gut health.
I'm talking about gut health.
Keeping your liver healthy.
I'm talking about glutathione being the most important antioxidant in your body to produce oxidative stress, which protects the mitochondria of your immune cells. Right? Vitamin C is certainly still up there. And now, really, there is a consideration for progesterone. Okay, so perhaps running a hormone test and getting a measurement of how healthy the progesterone levels are. Certainly, if the older you get, okay, the more important the progesterone levels are. So I would say that if you were over 45, 50, and your progesterone levels are low, I would probably do progesterone as a supplementation. Okay. Ron is asking, how helpful will a vaccine be if and when developed? Okay. Excuse me, I have to be very careful how I answer this question because this is being recorded, okay, and it's going to be posted also on our Facebook page. Okay, and anything anybody says about vaccinations, it's getting pulled down. But the powers that be. So I think I would err on the side of answering that question, Ron, more in a personal setting versus than on this recorded webinar. But I'll leave it at that. Okay. Any other questions? Going once. Going twice.
Thank you.
Going 3 times.
Okay. We did it.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys. Have a great weekend and happy Mother's Day to all.
Yeah.
Yeah.